everybody okay? Okay, so today's Bible theater is the story of the children of Israel leaving Egypt out of slavery, heading for the promised land. And to get them there, we have Moses and Joshua. So our Bible theater, we stay always in the integrity of the story, but we read between the lines. So, without further ado, Moses and Joshua, will you join us?
Well, folks, you have all heard of Moses, right? Right. Okay. Well, that's me. I'm one of the most famous people in history. Now listen, I'm not bragging, just telling it like it is. Now, I've had quite a journey today. 2,600 miles I came up to your time here in a time capsule just to be with you fine folks here at Cape Elyon. So, not bad for a guy 2,600 years old, huh? Now, so how do I look?
Great.
Thank you.
Moses, wait a minute. I came also, and not just you. I've shared this experience with you, you know. And I've been through so many battles, I gotta use a walker.
Okay, Joshua. I'm not trying to upstage you. Well, probably most of you kind of know about me, I hope. I'm not going to go into all the details, just a small bit of history. Mainly, we're here today to tell the story that begins with God calling me to lead the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt. So, a little bit of history. My family lived in Egypt, and the Pharaoh there ordered that all baby male infants be killed. He was afraid that the Jewish people were growing in population so much that one day they would be more than the Egyptians. Well, I'm sure you also all know the story of how my mother and my sister placed me in a reed basket and set me in the Nile River in order to save me. And I was found by the Pharaoh's daughter, the princess. She was a good woman. I cared for her, and she certainly cared for me. But along the way, I knew I was different. I always knew I was different. I knew that somehow that my heart belonged to the Hebrews. Now, I didn't understand why, because I didn't know that I, myself, was a Hebrew. Oh, yes, I dressed like an Egyptian, spoke their language, ate their food, but I never felt it in here, in my heart. I didn't feel it in my soul.
Yeah.
Oh, there was that day that I saw a Jewish slave being beaten by an Egyptian slave master. Oh no, I could not take that. I felt such a connection and a compassion for that slave. I killed the slave master. What had I done? Now Pharaoh's men were after me. And so I began to run, and I ran, and I ran, and I ran. I ended up in the desert in a place called Midian. I found work there as a shepherd for a man named Jethro. Wow. What a big change from living in a royal palace with all the nice clothes to living and working in the desert with sheep. But I loved my freedom. My life changed forever. Have you ever heard of a talking bush? Well, me neither. Until one day, I was out there taking care of the sheep, and there it was, a talking bush. I thought, oh, I'm hallucinating. Too much physical labor, too much in the sun. I was exhausted, I must be seeing things. But no, it was not an hallucination. All of a sudden, I saw an image of an angel, and then the voice of Yahweh. Now, you all say God, we Hebrews say Yahweh. Yahweh spoke to me. What was that? Take off my sandals. Why? I thought. This is no place to go barefoot in this desert, in the sand and the rocks. What? Why? I asked. Because you are on holy ground. Well, who could say no to that? So I took off my sandals right then and there, and indeed I could feel the holy ground beneath my feet. I thought, now what? My sandals are off. What next? Well, what was next? Oh my, God wanted me to lead the Hebrews, my people, out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery to a promised land, the land of milk and honey. I objected, of course. Oh, no, not me, God. I have a speaking problem. You need to send Aaron, my brother. He can speak for you. But that was not God's plan. With Aaron as my helper, I confronted Pharaoh. And when I told the Pharaoh what I was there to do, you can imagine his reaction. I told him, I'm going to take my people out of Egypt to a promised land. And Pharaoh said, no way, no way. As you probably learned in Sunday school, there were 10 plagues sent on to Egypt. One worse than the previous one. Each one kept getting worse. But still Pharaoh would not give in. Not until the last plague and his son died. So Pharaoh said, okay, you can take the Hebrews with you. Well, we all started the journey towards the Red Sea, which we would have to cross. And halfway there, we looked back, and there were Pharaoh's soldiers. He had changed his mind again. Well, we got closer and closer to the Red Sea, and the soldiers were about to catch us. Now what? And then God told me to lift my staff, and as I did, the waters parted like magic. We all crossed, and as soon as we were on the other side on dry land, the waters came rushing back in to close that opening. We had reached the wilderness. Next stop, the promised land. Oh, did we celebrate? Well, little did we know at that time that we would wander around the wilderness for 40 years. 40 years.
But yes, a lot happened at that time, and during those 40 years, I was part of that too, Moses.
Sorry, Joshua. Sorry. I always seem to be upstaging you.
I guess you could say that, Moses, but let's make sure that the audience here knows that we really were friends. But more than friends, we were companions. We were fellow sojourners together. And it was God's will that we were trying to carry out. We wanted to get encouraged, and you taught me and encouraged me how to take our people on that final journey through the wilderness. Well, since Moses gave you his childhood story, I'm going to give you a little bit of mine too. I was born in Egypt, and I came from an Israelite tribe called Ephraim. Now, my given name was Hosea. Yeah, you know me as Joshua. That's the name that Moses gave to me. And Moses, before he gave me the name Joshua, sent me ahead of the people on a dangerous mission. I was to go and scout out Canaan and see what was there, how dangerous it would be, and how we could get there. In order to do that, I was given a new name. Have you ever been given a new name? Well, Moses gave me a new name. I said my name was Hosea. That name means save. But then Moses gave me the name Joshua. And you know what that means? God saves. Jehovah saves. Joshua. I love my new name. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let me back up and I'll tell you a little bit more about meeting Moses, okay? In spite of the Pharaoh doing everything to stop us, we were able to go ahead and cross the Red Sea, and we got into the wilderness, okay? But that wasn't all yet. Some tribe decided to attack us. They didn't want us to get there, the Amalekites. And so they thought they could keep us from getting to the promised land. But I am a warrior, and I was able to lead them as a warrior. And that's when you, Moses, and I became inseparable. You were the spiritual leader. I was the warrior, the assistant, and the student under your wing during those years. Moses, old friend, you were my idol. You see, we really were a good balance. Spiritual leader, warrior. And we were at Mount Sinai together when you received those 10 commandments on tablets, the law of God. We called it the Torah. Well, Moses wanted me to keep watch because he was going to meet God on Mount Sinai. Well, I went ahead with him, and then I stopped and I waited in a camp. I was there 40 days alone. 40 days alone. I got lonely. I got tired. I got afraid. There were noises. What were they? Enemies? Animals? I wasn't sure. But what kept me going was that I knew that God was meeting with Moses. And I would have waited another 40 days, well, 40 years if I had to. You and I left the mountain together, and you were carrying those stone tablets that had on the 10 commandments, the law of God. Well, guess what? All of a sudden, when we got near, we saw the people, and we were so happy, but then we looked carefully. They were worshiping a golden calf. Moses, you were so angry, you didn't think, you just threw down those tablets, you broke them all up. And then what you did is you ran over, you grabbed that golden calf and you threw it in a fire pit. Wow. We thought that was it. But you know what? God is very persistent. God wasn't done. So what happened is that Moses went back up to the mountain, and nobody could come with him again, so I waited and waited. And now he came back down carrying the tablets again, the 10 commandments, the Torah, the law. And this time, no golden calf. And no broken tablets, thank you. Great. Well, there were a lot of other things that happened between us, Moses. One day, God told Moses to prepare me, Joshua, to become the new leader. And Moses, you laid your hand on me, and you said you were giving me the wisdom through God to do what I needed to do to lead our people. And then in front of everybody, you gave me some very encouraging words. You said, be strong and courageous. Don't be afraid, for God will be with you. After all, God is going ahead of you, you said, and the Lord will be with you, and God will neither fail you nor abandon you. And that was a very reassuring kind of thing for me to hear from you, Moses. So I was ready. After all, I've been preparing for 40 years. And at least we were now ready to lead into the wilderness. So guess what? The Jordan River opened up wide for me, just like the Red Sea had opened up for Moses. And there was one other similarity between Moses and me, I've got to tell you. When we were very close to Jericho, I looked up in the sky, and there was some kind of a figure. It was a man carrying something, not a staff. It was a sword. That was pretty frightening, because at first I thought, well, he's threatening me. But then he told me he was a captain, the leader of the Lord of hosts, and he was there to take us to Jericho. I fell on my knees, and then he said to me, take off your sandals. You're standing on holy ground. It was just like Moses in the burning bush. Our first battle after crossing the Jordan River was the Battle of Jericho. And they knew we were coming because the gates of Jericho were all closed up. But God had something else in mind, and so we did as God commanded Moses. We marched around the walls of Jericho for 6 days straight, all around those walls. And then on the 7th day, what did we do? We marched 7 times around the walls. And then we were ready to attack. The priests blew their horns, and we had our sacred tablets in the Ark of the Covenant, which holds it. And those led our people. And after the sound of the horn, we shouted, and those walls came down. Well, after the fall of Jericho, we had other victories too with God's help. And then we were able to secure most of Canaan, the land of milk and honey. So, as far as you can hear from this story, Moses, he received a call from God to lead our people out of slavery into the promised land, yeah? Well, I don't mean upstage Moses, but I was the one who led them over the finish line, right?
Indeed you were, Joshua. My friend, we spent 40 years together. We confided in one another. We laughed together. And sometimes we even cried together. We celebrated when times were good.
Yeah.
And we grieved when they were not. We spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to keep our people from complaining and losing faith. We talked a lot about God, sometimes overwhelmed at the task that God had given us to do, and sometimes in such awe that He had chosen us to do this work. We comforted each other when we started to doubt if we could even do what God had called us to do. Joshua, how you were by my side when I knew that I would not be taking our people into the promised land. Oh, how I remember that fateful day. We were almost at the end of traveling through the wilderness and would soon be crossing the River Jordan. Then I made a mistake. In God's eyes, a big mistake. You see, we had no water, and our people were getting angry, and they were getting angry with me because they were thirsty. Well, God told me to get everybody together and go to a rock and to speak to that rock, and the water would come out. But my anger got the best of me. To tell you the truth, by this time I was exhausted and disappointed in some of the people. Well, it came out in my words. You rebels! Must we bring you water out of this rock? And it was then that I took my staff and I whacked that rock, and I whacked it a second time. Well, water did indeed come out. Even so, God was not happy. Not happy at all that day. You see, I had disobeyed and did not show faith in God. God told me to speak to the rock. No, not me. I had to strike it. Again, not once, but twice. Now, I want everyone to understand this. Don't feel sorry for me. Goodness, no. Although I didn't make it to the promised land, I was with God. Face to face. Imagine that. God trusted me enough to give me the law. God did not stop loving me. God took me up to the top of Mount Nebo and showed me the promised land with the promise to give this sacred land to my descendants.
Moses, on the way here, we talked a little bit about how in the world this story could help everybody, and not just everybody in this room, but in the whole wide world.
Well, I know that a lot of you feel that the world is just so enslaved to all the negativity that's around, to the anger and the hatred, the bigotry, the power struggles, the lack of compassion, and so much more. Maybe you feel like you are wandering in the wilderness, going in circles full of fear, anxiety. Maybe you feel that God will not provide the manna that you need. Not just bread, but the strength and the wisdom you need to get through your wilderness. Maybe the land of milk and honey seems like a pipe dream, but you can have it. You can have the promised land right here in this life. Now, that doesn't mean that life is going to be perfect. We all know that. Life can be difficult. Life can be challenging. With life does come losses.
But we know that we have the potential and the strength to bring more goodness into our world. We know that we can do what is right and just and be compassionate. So let's focus on the possibilities and the potential of each one of us and everybody. Look, We can be the hands and the feet of God. We can be the ears and the eyes of God. We can give the peace of God to those around us. Then all of us will live in the land of milk and honey, a place that feels lovely, gives us sustenance and sweetness of life, like a manna, like the bread of life. Remember, God told all of us to take off our sandals because we are standing on holy ground. And you have a mission, and I have a mission, and Moses has a mission, to be a light to the world. So let us take off our sandals, imaginary or not, because all of us are standing on holy ground.
Well, thank you all for being here, and thank you, Reverend Norris and Reverend Menrick are, as we were joking in the kitchen, Mo and Joe. They were wonderful. And thank you, our wonderful choir, Cindy for providing music, Kaylee always for your wonderful technical assistance, and Dave for doing whatever needs to be done, so.
And we thank you, Lee, for writing this marvelous play
Oh, you're welcome.
and bringing us all together on holy ground.